Hello, hello. Welcome back to Delight in Salt and Light, where we gather here every other week to delight in God's word and truth together to learn more how to be the salt and light in the world that He calls us to be. So today we are finally on episode 2, and I'm so excited about it. Praise God for just how He's been moving all of these little pieces together to get this podcast up and running. So today we are going to be going through our testimonies and just sharing our individual stories with all of you guys so you can see just our background and where we came from. So my name is Mikayla, and we are going to be starting today with my testimony. Following that, after me will be Michelle, because you guys will see in our testimonies that they really just tie in together. Basically, the end of my testimony is kind of the beginning to Michelle's, so I'm really excited to show that to you guys. So first, starting off with when I was younger growing up, I did not grow up in a Christian household. My dad was Methodist and my mom was Catholic, and my mom was a lot more spiritual, more open spiritually than my dad. So my dad just kind of cared about if my sister and I just had something to believe in growing up. So he kind of just went with my mom and just her side of the family and just the traditions that they had throughout the years. Because we never, especially my dad growing up, he never really had a relationship with his family. So my mom's side of the family kind of became his family when they got married. So that's why he just kind of went along with what my mom's side of the family was doing throughout the years. So that led to my sister and I growing up in Catholicism. And so because they didn't follow the Lord when I did end up coming to Christ, it was definitely a hard transition that I had in terms of just really recognizing that I wasn't at home, that this world is just not my home. And that was really rough. And I didn't have any friends or family that knew the Lord just in general. But praise God that He was able to give me this beautiful community of friends I now have, and I'm able to not only just have these wonderful friends, but I'm able to do this podcast too with all of my friends. So that's just amazing. Praise God. Okay, so that was my background and where I came from. Overall, it was a really good, loving, stable environment. I love my family. I love my parents so much. Truly, even though it wasn't a Christ-centered home for me growing up, I did have an amazing childhood experience, and I'm very grateful for that and for the grace that God had upon my family. And so with that, growing up, I really did, growing up, just being more secure and knowing that if I had a problem, if I was upset, if something was wrong, I could always go to my family and they would talk to me about it and help me through it. And so that served as a really good foundation for me for life, but everything was good home-wise. Everything's very good, very positive, very good, close relationship with my family. But then on the social end, especially going into middle school and high school, was a lot rougher for me. I didn't have any friends really. I only have one friend in middle school who didn't feel like a friend because her parents put her in this, that, and the third for all the after-school activities. So it didn't really feel like I had any friends at the time, and I was just very lonely. My sister had a bigger social life than me. We're very much opposite growing up. She had so many friends, and I only had one friend in middle school, and that trend kind of continued into high school similarly. So I felt jealous of her a lot of times as well, and it's just like comparing myself to her a lot and comparing myself to all my peers around me, because I felt that at the time like I should have had more friends and I didn't. So I kind of tried to lie to myself, try to like make myself believe I had more friends than what I really did. And so that was kind of a rough time for me. So that was like middle school and going into high school. My one friend that I had in middle school, she reconnected with like a mutual friend of someone that we knew in elementary school, but my friend in middle school continued to stay friends with her while she was away and her family moved. So when she moved back, they reconnected. So then through her, I became really good friends with this friend that I've known since elementary school but moved away. And so that's kind of when things really started to come downhill for me, and this is really what I want to just kind of paint this picture for you here, what that looked like, because it really what just set everything up for me to really start coming to Christ. It really kind of all starts with what happened with this friend. So yeah, this friend became my best friend very fast, very quickly. I was best friends with her all throughout high school, college, into young adult years, so almost like 10 years pretty much. She was my best friend, and I didn't realize it at the time, but it was a mentally and emotionally abusive relationship that I was in with my best friend. And it was just the lowest of lows that I was ever been. I was quite literally a shell of myself. This is who I was before I came to Christ, even though I had a very positive childhood and just home experience. There's just so many things that I learned from my best friend that I thought to be true, and I just believed all of these lies. I normalized all of these things that were just not normal and honestly scary and just very toxic and very abusive. Narcissism, gaslighting, control, all those things. All those things honestly became my norm. I was living in just a nonstop state of anxiety and fight or flight mode for years, honestly. And it wasn't until I started dating my ex-boyfriend, which was probably the last 2 years or so, the last 2 years of my relationship, like with my best friend, I started dating my ex. It wasn't until I started dating him that I was able to see, like, oh, I have no boundaries with my best friend. I'm living my life for her, and my anxiety is through the roof. I just thought at first that my anxiety was because of my brain, because something just wrong with my brain, or just the way that my brain functioned. It was actually about a month before I started dating my ex that I started going to therapy, because my best friend actually convinced me to go, which is kind of funny enough that she's the one who put me in therapy in the first place, but also she's the one who encouraged me to go, because my anxiety was so bad at the time because of the abuse that I was in, but I just didn't know at the time. So it's kind of ironic how that worked out. But it's because of the fact that I did go to therapy a month before I started dating my ex, and then I started dating him. I was able to see that there were things in the relationship that were not normal. All the lies that I believed in, my normal of toxicity, it was through my ex, through dating him, that I was able to see those things, and those things were able to be like brought to the surface with having an outside person point them out. And throughout high school and college, there were things that my family point out, but, you know, it's very easy to say to your family, at least for me, like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, you don't know her like I do, all these things. But it wasn't until my ex started pointing out that I began to really see it, and like see like where he was coming from with that, because number one, it's an outside source, but number two, these things were directly impacting my relationship with him that I cared very much about at the time. So that's really what happened with that. God used that as a catapult to really just save me. And there was some stuff that happened too with the Lord that I don't really want to get into, because I really just want to get into the meat and potatoes here of how I actually came to Christ. But so yeah, just up until this point, just these last couple of years before I was actually saved, I was in that abusive friendship. I started dating my ex and everything. All these things that were just coming up to the surface. For the couple of years leading up to that, I was just a shell of myself and just trying so hard to just find peace and just security, I guess. Again, not within my home, but in terms of myself, and just who I was, because I was just so broken inside. So within the last year that I was dating my ex, eventually I was able to end the friendship with my best friend, because during my lowest of lows, in my lowest of moments, it was actually kind of scary because I kind of felt psychotic in a way, which definitely did not have any psychotic symptoms, I would say. I definitely did not have anything diagnosed by a therapist, which this whole time I was seeing a therapist very regularly. But I know now, looking back, that there is a war being waged over my soul between God and the enemy. I didn't know at the time, but I think that's why it kind of felt psychotic to me, because I just felt this pulsating tug of war within my mind. One part of me, one side of my mind saying, let her go, she's no good for you, she doesn't deserve you, this is bad for you, this is not good for you. And then the other half just saying, she's your best friend, she loves you, she's just trying to care for you, she's just trying to protect you. And both voices were so loud, and it was a constant war all the time, just going back and forth. And it felt like chaos, it really did. And so during one of those moments, Jesus quite literally met me where I was at. I remember just crying, journaling, just like letting everything out, and I felt so hopeless, but Jesus met me there. He gave me hope just in the middle of my mess in that moment. I heard a voice, and I just heard something say, and at the time I wasn't exactly sure if this was Jesus or not either, but in the moment I just heard something say, this isn't going to last forever. Your friendship with her is going to end. It's supposed to end. It's not going to last forever. And I didn't really know where that came from. I didn't know why it was said. I just held on to it. I think because deep down my soul, I wanted to believe that, because I was just living in such chaos and mayhem for so long that I was just hoping that one day it would end, and this tiniest of sign of a possibility that it might end, it was enough for me to just cling on to it. So then for the next 6 months, that's what I did. I clung on to it, and then within the last couple months of that, I don't know, I just kind of start to have this feeling within me that it was true, kind of in the back of my mind. I knew the whole time that I just had a feeling that, like, it was Jesus, like, it couldn't have been me, because he quite literally calmed my storm right there in that moment. So I knew it couldn't have been me. I knew it had to be an outside source. And so I just held on to that. And then I started to feel like, okay, like this is true, like it is going to end. I just need to wait on God and his timing on when that is, the time, the day, the hour. And then I ended up switching therapists for some reason, and it was actually something that therapist said that I finally was like, okay, it's going to end, and it's going to end soon. I feel like God just really used this therapist to just speak to me and just give me direction and just like practically what I needed to do. And then right after that, I knew it was going to end soon, but I didn't know exactly when. At this point, I was just trying to get through my thesis final for my master's program. And also at this point, I developed the flu from my dad. So I'm there with the flu, literally with a fever, like the sweats, like heat flashes, everything, chills and fever, trying to finish my thesis, and I ended up just having a bad experience with my best friend again. But this was just the last straw for me, because not only was I sick with the flu, was trying to finish my thesis, she knew how hard I've been working for that, and she seemed to just care about only like me going to hang out with her and doing things with her, did not ask me how I was feeling, if I was feeling any better, if there was anything that she could do for me. It was just a couple of days in a row of her pestering me and saying that, and this is what really did it for me, when she ended up saying, after your thesis is over, you won't have an excuse to hang out with me anymore. Or to not hang out with her anymore. Because I was very busy with school that semester trying to finish my master's program. And so at that point I was just like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. No matter what I do, no matter the boundaries I place, no matter how assertive I am, no matter how well I communicate, no matter what, I'm going to be trapped in this prison cell. The only way for me to break out of this prison cell is to break myself out and to remove myself from it. So I was still sick with the flu and finished my thesis, and I did it. I ended the friendship. And you would have thought that at this point, this is when I would be saved. Nope. But it was definitely the catalyst for me to actually be saved 6 months later, because I knew at that point that I was just saying to God, okay, if you brought me through all of this, and if you gave me the strength to finally end this friendship, then you have to help me with the aftermath of it too. You have to get me through this also. And he did. The next 3 months after that were grueling. It quite literally was hell on earth. It was just working through the post-traumatic stress of it all was even worse, honestly, than the abuse itself, quite literally. But about 3 months after that, the Lord delivered me from the abuse that I went through. And then 3 months after that, so 6 months in total from when I ended the friendship, my ex-boyfriend now, but at the time my boyfriend, emotionally cheated on me. And again, in that moment when I found out that he emotionally cheated on me, Jesus met me there. It was as if in that moment when I found out he emotionally cheated on me, my whole entire world was flipped upside down. Because first, everything with my best friend, I thought that we were gonna get married and have each other in our wedding, our kids were gonna be our nieces and nephews for each other, the whole 9 yards. And then with my ex, I thought I was gonna marry this guy, and all at once all those things were ripped away from me, especially with my social life too, since first my best friend was my social life, and then my ex and his social life became my social life. So when I found out he emotionally cheated on me, it quite literally as if everything was just ripped away from me, except for my family, which thank God I still had my family. But everything else, it just felt like, well, all I have left now is Jesus, because I knew Jesus was with me there in that moment. And it just felt like that after all of this, after all that has been taken away with me, Jesus is still here with me. He's the only one who truly never leaves me nor forsake me. And so when I made the decision to break up with him, I really was wrestling before the Lord. Should I stay with him? Should I not? And when I made a decision in my heart that I needed to break up with him in order to continue forward with the progress that the Lord has made with me, it was in that moment that I received the Holy Spirit. It was as if for so long I mentally believed, I logically believed in Jesus, but it was in that moment where I just completely surrendered. I'm like, okay, Lord, have your way. I don't know what I'm doing, but the rest of my life is yours. It was in that moment that I just believed in my heart. And that's when I received the Holy Spirit and I was saved, really. So that is really how I ended up coming to Christ. It was a long journey, even just leading up to everything with my ex-friend and ex-boyfriend. There was some stuff that happened there throughout the years that really just led to God pursuing me, but it took a really long time for me to be in full pursuit of him back. So for the rest of it, I want to kind of transition now into Michelle's testimony, because this is where things just really start for her, and I guess where I leave off, then Michelle will then pick up her testimony. But I will say that after a week after everything happened with my ex and I broke up with him, I was telling Michelle and some of our mutual friends we had at the time just what was happening and the updates in my life. And it was that conversation that God was able to use to just be a light to her. And when I left that night going home, I felt the Lord tell me that he was going to use me to bring Michelle home. And let's just say he was right. It did happen.
Hey, so my name is Michelle. I'm another member of Delight in Salt and Light, and Mikayla's testimony has to do with the initiation of mine, which I'll talk about a little later. First off, I just wanted to start with my upbringing. So I didn't grow up in a Christian household. I grew up in a Catholic household, but my parents weren't strict Catholics. We went to church here and there once in a while, but it wasn't anything on a normal basis. I did make my communion, and I never made my confirmation. That is about the extent of what my religious upbringing was. And my brother actually was saved at a certain point, but at that point, when I was going with him, I was more lukewarm, versus fast forward where I am fully dedicated now. So yeah, neither of my parents were followers of Christ. And since my brother was saved before me, let's see. So he was saved when he was about 18 years old. It was his senior year of high school. And I think I was graduating like 5th grade at that point. So I was also pretty young to really understand the whole context of religion, because I wasn't really brought up in it. So I would go once in a while to my brother's church. I would help with fundraising events once in a while, like do baking and stuff like that, but it was never anything serious where I was going on a normal basis. So I was revealed to Christ, but I just wasn't fully committed to Christ growing up. I also have an aunt and uncle and my cousins who are all born-again Christians, and they were always a big light in my dad's side of the family in terms of trying to bring people to Christ and having them come to different events. And I did end up going away to a Christian camp for a few years from when I was 16 to 18, where I also was exposed to more of what Christ was doing through people. But again, I was lukewarm and I wasn't fully all in at that point. So in terms of how I was saved, now I'll talk about the end of her part on here. So the initiation of me being saved is when I saw Mikayla about a week after she broke up with her ex, and me, her, and our mutual friends were talking about what she went through. And I just sat there in pure awe, because I was like, she was smiling and laughing and joyful while she was talking about what she went through. And I was like, is she delusional? Because anyone else in this position would be absolutely bedridden and just crippled by this. And I know if I was in her position, I wouldn't be able to leave my house for months. I would be absolutely shattered from something like that. And I was like, how in the world does she have so much happiness through such a difficult moment of her life? And that's where it just hit me, and I was like, I need to talk to her about this more one-on-one. So I ended up reaching out to her and just asking her, like, how do you have so much peace with what just happened to you? And she was like, it's, just because of Jesus. I have him as my firm foundation, and he's just giving me the strength to get through this difficult time. And I was just in pure amazement, and I was like, I want to be able to have that kind of strength so I can face any trial without being crippled by it, because where I was mentally, I would have definitely been taken down by a situation like that. So that's what initiated me. So her testimony served as a light to me and drew me closer to God. And me and Mikayla ended up starting a Bible study one-on-one on the book of Matthew. And that's where I started to learn more about God and started really feeling his presence and feeling that, what I call holy girl tingles. And that's where I really started to experience his presence and realize that he was with me all along, and there just needed to be a situation that I needed to see the outcome of it through being saved by Christ in order for me to understand what Christ could really do for your life. And that's what Mikayla was for me. So from there, we started our Bible study, like I said, and then afterwards, she eventually invited me to go to church with her. And it did take me a little while to go to church. The enemy was definitely trying to attack me and prevent me from going to church with her a few times after she invited me, but I eventually did get there, and I eventually did get to the life group that she was inviting me to for a while as well. And that life group experience with the young adults was just so life-changing for me, especially for someone who's in the beginning of their journey with being saved and just learning about Christ and just how to apply like his love and strength and endurance and compassion and peace into your life. That life group definitely helped me learn how to apply certain parts of God's word to my life and how I perceive situations and in how I treat other people in my life. So that definitely served as a pivotal point for me in terms of my journey, and I don't think I would have been able to grow in my faith journey as strongly as I did if it wasn't for that life group experience that I had. So once I was saved by Jesus, there was definitely a change in me in terms of the way that I was responding to people, and people did notice that. I ended up going through a really difficult time these past 4 years where, I'm just going to do the meat and potatoes. I won't go into intricacies. That's for another episode if it comes out. But for time purposes, I'll just say that I did something completely out of character that I've never done before, where everyone in my life was completely shocked by my actions. But once they realized what I was going through, that they didn't know what I was going through in such a short amount of time. And there was a lot of trauma that was built up that I just buried my entire life, that I wasn't doing anything to really uproot it. And it just ended up coming out of me during a really short period of time when I was going through a lot of overwhelming things in my life. I went through a surgery, a traumatic experience that triggered childhood trauma and high school trauma. And then I found out my grandmother who was the healthiest person I knew on this planet Earth, who was always active and hiking and biking and playing golf and dancing. She ended up getting diagnosed with terminal colon cancer, and it was a complete and utter shock to my family. And I just sat there, and with this, because of a surgery I got, I had to take all W's in my class, and I wasn't able to finish my finals. So I went into that next semester with having to do my internship student teaching, which was a complete full-time commitment on top of going to like a student teacher seminar 3 hours a week, on top of trying to make up my work from the prior semester for all the classes I took W's in, and also go back and forth to Florida a few times from New York to Florida to help take care of my grandmother before she passed away. And she was given 6 to 12 months to live. She only lived 3.5 of that 6 to 12 month sentence. And I saw really just dark sides of my family members that I never thought that I would see. And it really destroyed my innocence in terms of how I viewed certain family members in my life. And it just destroyed me to my core. And as a result of all of these stipulations, I ended up doing something completely out of character from a bunch of buried trauma that I carried with me up until that point. And I carried a lot of guilt and shame from what I did. I did a major sin, and when I first was saved, I didn't open up to Mikayla about it. I was scared that she was going to judge me and stop being friends with me because of it, so I actually went a while without telling her, but she could tell there was something wrong because I kept telling her and saying, like, there's a sin I can't talk about, and eventually she told me that I could fill out a prayer card, and I actually requested a pastor through our church center point to call me and serve as like a liaison between me and God, so I would be able to bring that sin to the surface and talk about it. And after I did that, it was a lot easier for me to start talking about it, and I was able to bring it to Mikayla and then eventually bring it to God. And through that experience, I learned that you should always go to God first when you have a sin instead of going to other people and a pastor if possible, because God's the ultimate healer and he's the one that's going to truly transform your life and do what he can to prevent you from repeating that sin again. So that definitely had a big impact on me. And, you know, even after I did bring my sin to the light, I did still hold a lot of guilt and shame about it, and I really let it, like, destroy me for a long time and hold me down from emerging into the person I am today. But once I was able to bring that sin to the light, and bring up the shame and guilt that I felt, I was able to actually just start breaking it down and uprooting all those feelings, and I've been able to heal a lot of those parts of me that felt guilt and shame, and realizing that when you are saved, Christ makes you new and he washes away all of your sins, and that's why he was sacrificed for us, because he knew all the sins we were going to commit in this world. So it definitely helped me bringing it to the surface, and then just learning about how God transforms our sins and brings peace amongst all of the chaos that comes with sinning. And people responded in a whole bunch of different ways. I had people in my life that were really happy for me, and they saw the transformation in me, and they were very supportive of it, and other people were a little taken aback by me being saved and were weirded out by it and didn't fully understand it because they had no religious background or context and didn't know what I was talking about when I said I was saved, and didn't know what I meant by the enemy is attacking me and stuff like that. And I won't go into specifically who, but there were definitely people that just didn't fully understand what I was talking about after I was saved. And since I didn't grow up in a Christian household, I think my environment definitely shaped me into being a very, like, malicious person, spiteful person growing up, because I saw how my parents, who had a really nasty divorce when I was 8 years old, how they treated each other throughout that experience. And, you know, you remember that as children. Those moments stick out to you in your brain. And I realized that, you know, I've been in therapy for the last 3.5 years, and therapy kind of played a harmonious role with me being saved, because all the work that I did with my therapist, it was more so like I understood the things that I learned through and was growing through, and still the things that were being uprooted, but I wasn't really able to fully apply what my therapist was telling me. Like, the advice that she was giving me all along, I wasn't able to fully apply it until I was saved. And once I was saved, I was able to apply all the information that my therapist was trying to tell me over and over again up until that point, and I was able to actually put it into action. And since then, I've just been learning so much, growing so much, and I'm able to apply the things that she teaches me. And thank God she's so open spiritually. So even though she's not specifically Christian, she's very open and respects all different backgrounds. So it hasn't impacted my... So since she was open spiritually and she respects all religious backgrounds, it didn't impact my journey with therapy once I was saved. So it has definitely symbiotically played a positive role together as a team between the intense therapy that I did once a week for 3.5 years now, and since I was saved last January. I take therapy very seriously. I'm a big advocate for mental health. I have anywhere between 500 to 600 pages on my Microsoft Word doc of every single therapy session I had since I started 3.5 years ago. And I always do a reflection and I introspect on what I learned from my session, and I learn how to apply it now through God's perspective since being saved. And it has definitely helped me grow emotionally. I have a lot more emotional maturity. I learned how to navigate through boundaries. That was one of the first things that I really dissected when going to therapy, and I focused on for about 1.5 years in terms of, due to my boundaries being disrespected when I was younger, I didn't know how to identify boundaries, and in turn I didn't know how to respect boundaries since I didn't know how to identify them nor navigate boundaries. So that's something that therapy and God helped me work through. Communication, I'm definitely a much better communicator now. I used to bottle things up and then just explode on whoever I was dating, and now I'm able to talk about something in the moment, and I'm able to have a very compassionate and empathetic perspective in terms of knowing that the way that I view a situation is going to be different from how they view a situation, because we all are a product of our upbringing, and however we were brought up is going to shape the way that that person perceives a situation, and that helps me have more empathy for people when I talk to them about situations and we communicate. So that's definitely a big part of how Christ has transitioned parts of me that were from my childhood for the better. Christ has definitely took the inability to navigate boundaries, the spitefulness that I used to have when someone would verbally hurt me. I would do whatever I could to go out of my way to hurt them back, just because that's how I would see my family navigate their issues. And just the amount of empathy I have too definitely has improved. I didn't have any empathy. It was just my way or the highway. 3.5 years ago, I didn't know how to view situations from anyone else's perspective besides my own. And with that situation where I did something that was completely out of character, it shook me to my core, and I started spending a lot of time by myself. Because before that, I would have to be around other people. I was very codependent, and as a result of that, I became a product of my environment by the people that I was surrounding myself with, and whatever their opinion was, I would just agree to agree, and I didn't know how to think for myself, so I had no identity before I was saved by Christ. My identity was formed by whoever I was hanging out with. It was so bad to the point where I couldn't even leave my house without having someone with me to run a simple errand or go to the store to pick up food or do grocery shopping. I always had to be with people or have someone at my house. So since this situation where I did something completely out of character, it dismantled me to my core and forced me to be by myself. And then I was able to actually do a deep dive into self-introspection and realize the things that were toxic within me that I had to work on, and Christ has only elevated that since then. And in terms of my testimony, I hope that I can be a light to other people. I can say this. Since being saved, me and Mikayla have definitely realized that God ordained this relationship between us with being best friends, because there are things that I lack that Mikayla is strong with, and vice versa. There are things that she lacked that I'm stronger with based on our experiences, and we've just both been so helpful to each other, and it's been such an edifying friendship. And along the way, we formed this just beautiful group of people where we are just continuing to edify each other and help each other through each and every one of our experiences. But yeah, that's the story of my testimony, and I hope that this can serve as a light for anyone else who is listening to this.
So, my name is Annalise. I'm one of the people on Delight in Salt and Light that is behind the scenes right now. We're normally behind the scenes, but right now I'm on the mic. So my testimony with Christ was just like how you've heard from Mikayla and Michelle. I also didn't grow up in a Christian household, but I also didn't grow up in the most loving of households either, or not either, but like in general. Yes, I had parents that provided a roof over my head for me and my sister Chloe and my older sister Megan. We didn't go to church on Sundays. We had Christian values, but we didn't live it out. My parents brought me and my sisters to missionettes, which in the Assemblies of God is like a church Girl Scouts type of thing. Growing up, we did that, but we didn't go to church. They just brought it up thinking it was a good foundation for their children. Nothing much. We didn't even go to church on Christmas and Easter, but we celebrated the holidays. As in the Christian community, you would say you're CEO, Christian, Christmas and Easter only Christians. But I could say as a kid, like, I did pray. I did know right from wrong as a kid to some extent. I knew what was wrong, what was right. When I got into my teens, I could say mainly middle school and into high school, mainly into my junior year of high school, that's kind of where I went off on my own and lived in the world. Lived without that, I could say, going to missionettes every week. So it's like essentially not living for Christ for the first 17 years of my life, and then at 17 living for the Lord. When I was a kid, and this is kind of where it starts, my struggle was sexual sin. And it starts as a kid, because as a kid I was sexually abused by a kid my own age. I'm not going to get into too much detail about that. That happened at the age of 6, and then it happened again when I was 8. I didn't bring it up to my parents, because how does a 6-year-old know how to bring it up to their parents? You don't know, because you're not taught that, because it's one of those things that's like, I wasn't taught how to talk about that or know how to bring it up. But I also wasn't taught boundaries. But that's a whole other thing. And then I could say mainly when I was like 16, 16, I started dating my first boyfriend at the time. It was my first relationship. We dated for 21 months, almost 2 years. And after a year, he started pushing to have sex with me. I wanted to wait, but he kept on pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. So much so to the point where it's like, fine, just get him to, for lack of better words, get him to shut up. And I gave myself to him in that way. And it was after then that I started to question my sexuality, that I wasn't so sure. I knew being homosexual was wrong, but I also knew that what I was doing with my boyfriend at the time wasn't right. I opened up to my parents about it. I got the acceptance from my mother, but the truth from my father. And it's when you're getting that half and half and you're not getting the answers that you're needing to hear. And it's almost like one's giving you more anxiety and the one's not giving you the love. You don't know where else to turn to. I remember going through that time thinking that more sex would satisfy, and I'm kind of grateful that I didn't turn to pornography, that I didn't turn to drugs or alcohol to satisfy that, because a part of me knew that was wrong, but also feared my father and feared his reactions, what my parents would think. So I'm kind of grateful for that built-in fear, but I'm also not at the same time. So there was that. But also in my teen years, I remember my parents going out Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights, coming home drunk, screaming, yelling, fighting, and it going on till about 3 o'clock in the morning, and wondering if my parents loved me and my siblings so much, why they would allow this hurt. And that kept on happening over and over and over again, and it just caused so much anxiety, PTSD, and trauma and hurt and pain that I didn't know was wrong or wasn't normal until I came to Christ. And continuing from there, the thing that brought me to Christ was the searching with my boyfriend at the time, thinking, again, more sex would satisfy, idolizing a YouTuber that I liked would satisfy, just straight up meditation would satisfy, talking about it would satisfy, but it didn't. And yes, those things brought peace for the short term, but they didn't bring peace for the long term. It would be for lack of better words, it'd be putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. Yeah, it's a quick fix to cover the issue, but not to solve the issue, not to get to the deep root, the problem that would truly fix it. And it was then that I spoke to someone my older sister's age who I went to high school with, that she, for lack of better words, mentored me, showed me the love and the truth that I needed, and showed me Jesus. And it was in November of 2017 that I went to a youth group on Wednesday nights. And I remember worshiping that night and just feeling the Lord and crying and realizing this is what I've been looking for. And I'm still with this guy at the time, wanting him to come to church with me, and he didn't. And now fast forward, at this point I'm roughly 4 months into my faith. February of 2018, God calls me to break up with this man, or boy, young man. Audibly, I hear the voice of God, and I know that it was God because I knew that if this voice could physically speak, the whole earth would shatter. That this voice had authority. And it was hard. It was hard to obey God's voice, because I was like, no, God, I love him. I don't want to leave him. But it got to the point in which I couldn't ignore the voice of God, and I kept on telling him the struggle that I was going through with questioning my sexuality, telling him I wanted to wait, telling him that what we're doing isn't honoring God, and if anything, just pushed him away, but drew me closer to God, because I knew I was honoring God in what I was doing. And it got to the point in which this relationship became emotionally unhealthy, mentally unhealthy, and almost became physically abusive. And it got to the point where it's like, I have to obey God, and I ended it. And then 2 weeks after I ended things, I think it was not 2, but 3 weeks. It was actually 3 weeks after I ended things with my boyfriend at the time that my friend Juliana passed away from cancer. And I remember going through this thinking, if God is so good, why would he allow someone who is just following him to go through hell? And it was then that the Lord showed me Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11, that says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. They're plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." And it was in that time that I realized I may not understand it now, but God has a good plan for me, and this is something in it. And now fast forward, I'm still walking with the Lord, and even after my first relationship, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and just got out of my 7th relationship, there were times where I still struggled with sexual sin. There were times where I fell short of God's glory. And it was in those times where I repented, and it wasn't easy, but it's with God that I've repented, that he convicted me. I haven't done it perfectly, but he has shown me his grace and his love, even in times when I disobeyed him blatantly. When God has told me, no, don't date this person, blatantly, I disobeyed, but he still showed me his love. And it's now that I'm walking with where God has called me, but it's also that I'm now waiting, honoring God in the way that I date, and have learned from my mistakes. Now going back to my family, I remember, again, my parents coming home drunk, screaming, yelling, my mother putting band-aids over bullet wounds at 3 o'clock in the morning, questioning, like, if I'm loved by this person, why are they hurting me? I remember for the longest time looking at my parents as this is what I don't want to do when I have kids. And questioning, do I even want my future children to see them because of how they acted? And I remember thinking, I don't want my future kids to have anything to do with my parents unless they change their behavior. And from the moment that I've been saved, I've been praying for my parents, for them to change their behavior, for the salvation of my parents, for them to know the Lord and to taste and see and understand what I found in Jesus, that he is good even through the hard times. And now being 7 years into my faith, at year 6, 5 years of me praying, I remember them coming to church with me and them just actually tasting and seeing that the Lord is good. And this one's gonna bleed into the next testimony, which is my twin sister Chloe. And I've seen her grow in her faith now, and with where she was, and I was praying for her as well. And just seeing my family now for the past year and a half, roughly year and a half, walk with the Lord after waiting, thinking that prayers weren't going to be answered, just seeing that toxic and unhealthy and damaging behavior repeat. I lost hope, and I was just hurt and in pain, and there'd be times where I was in therapy shaking because my body has kept the score from the stress and the trauma and the hurt and the damage that has been done. But it's almost like seeing them once they came to God, it was almost like all was forgiven. It's almost like I was never mad at you. I was just sad because you didn't know, and it hurt. But it's almost like now seeing that change has renewed everything, and I'm seeing that, and all I can say is, with every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God.
Hi, so I'm Chloe. I'm Annalise's sister. So I'm not going to repeat everything that she has said about our upbringing because it was very similar in the sense of we had parents that blatantly disrespected our boundaries. Even though they had used that and said it was out of love, it really didn't feel like it was out of love, but she had already said enough about that. And I feel like my testimony really starts with the death of our mutual friend, Juliana, because she was so near and dear to me. And I feel like at that moment, like, I just saw Annalise come to Christ and how she took it, where she had grown closer to God. I had taken it and used it in the opposite sense. I got so angry at God for, I had thought, like, if there was a God and if he was a good God, why would he let such a good person die such a cruel and almost insufferable, painful death, where if he did exist, why would he allow such a painful thing to happen to someone he loves? So I had unfortunately taken God's grace and I had basically thrown it in the trash, and I had begun a dark, anxiety-inducing, depressing, and almost insufferable path for my soul. I had begun a path of Wicca. I had begun a path of doing spells. I had begun a path of witchcraft. And inevitably, I was basically on an exponential path to hell, to say the least. And I, like, it's, like, weird. Like, I knew, like, I, like, believed in God, but I didn't believe that he was good if he had allowed such a cruel thing. So I got angry and thought that he had caused all this pain and suffering because that's just who he was in my mind at that point. And I just started deep diving into Wicca and using tarot cards to see if I could, in a way, like, talk with my friend. I had done all these spells to bring good luck, good fortune, love, and bring all these good things, and I would check the moon phases in my horoscopes, and I would, like, tie photographs to, like, someone I had, like, loved, and, like, put it in, like, a jar and with cinnamon and, like, red string and blah, 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 because, oh, it's a love spell. It's gonna bring the one that you love, and they're gonna bring, it's like, oh, that's all that I wanted. But that was, like, going back to the death of my friend. I was also, like, right after that, I was, like, dealing with a breakup too. So it was just kind of like one thing after another, and I didn't feel love at all, but rather I had felt so abandoned that I had, in a sense, tried to turn myself into my own god. And that was just, it led me to self-harm more so than I had already had. It had led me to pulling out my own hair. It had led me to indulging in drugs and taking, like, to the point, like, drugs for my anxiety to numb the pain that I had wished wasn't there. And I kept, like, seeing my sister, and she kept telling me of God's goodness, and I basically, in a way, I would tell her, like, shut up, I don't want to hear about God. Like, why would he do this to me? Why would he put me through all this pain if he was a good God? And that just kept playing over and over and over in my mind for a while. And like, this was like during like my current relationship, like his family was such a God-fearing family, and they, like, even though they knew like the dark path I was down, they had opened their arms to me and they had shown me love. And yeah, I would go to church with them, and I was kind of like, okay, like, if it makes him happy, I'll go, just to kind of like satisfy them. And it actually got to a point where like I kind of, like, when I first went to church with them, I cried, and like I was lukewarm, and I would still go to church with them, but I would still later that night indulge in witchcraft and basically opening portals to these demons who I basically befriended because they were my spirit guides. They knew what was best for me, and blah 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 blah. And then a couple years after that, so this was maybe like 2020, like when the last time I had touched my tarot cards, I felt like something evil had attached itself to me, and I felt like I was being tormented. I felt like someone was hovering over my shoulder, watching my every movement, trying, in a sense, almost like something's trying to kill you, almost. Like they are out for your blood, they are out for your life, and that's like anxiety inducing. And I didn't touch them, but I also didn't get rid of them either. I thought like, oh, it's just a part of me, maybe I'll go back to it. I never did. But like, rather I had further grown in my relationship with God, but I still wasn't devoted to him at that point. Until the day after the eclipse, which was April 9th, 2024. I had woke up, I remember the exact time, at like 3:32 in the morning. I woke up from the most terrifying, like so vivid nightmare. I had woke up and this dream was terrifying. I remember in this dream I was in the bathroom getting ready for my day, or like basically, I don't know if it was the end of the day or the beginning of the day, but all I know, I like had gotten out of the shower, I'd put a towel on, I was about to do like my skincare routine, and I don't exactly know the name of the song, but I was singing a song, I was dancing, and I look in the mirror in my bathroom, and my reflection turned into a demon with shark teeth. And if any of you guys have ever watched like Emily, like not Emily Rose, The Exorcist, but like it's like this Japanese horror movie and the girl crawls out of the TV. So like my reflection was a black shadow with shark teeth, and it was reaching from behind the mirror out to me, but the mirror was stretching. And I had woken up and I noticed the time. It was 3:32, and that's like known as the witching hour, when the veil between our world and the spirit world is at its most thin. And if it was anything that I learned from my boyfriend's mom, she had ingrained into my brain, if you wake up at that time, you better be praying Psalms 91 like your life depended on it. And I had opened up my Bible that I had, and I had prayed Psalms 91 for like maybe like 6-7 hours till I felt safe. And like I honestly, like, I didn't know what to do. Like I've never felt more scared in my life. I felt terrified. I felt like something was trying to kill me, like that time after I had touched my tarot cards for the last time. And I had like Annalise, she had turned into a prayer warrior for me. My boyfriend's family has turned into a prayer warrior. I had coworkers turn into prayer warriors for me. And for months, and I mean like months, this whatever it was, this demon from hell was out to get me and out for my life, it felt. And I just felt like everything was crumbling. I felt like my sanity was crumbling. I felt like my life was crumbling. But eventually it all stopped. It stopped for a little while. And I felt so at peace. And I'm very grateful to God for that, because it has helped me strengthen my relationship with the Lord. And it's like, I don't know how else to explain it other than that, because my relationship with the Lord has grown exponentially, and I had just trusted him blindly with a lot of the things in my life. I had started going back to church. I had been reading my Bible daily. I had been like asking my boyfriend's mom's questions and how like I could grow more and how I could get rid of what was on my back. And I had bought anointing oil and anointed the heck out of my room, and I kept praying and praying and praying, and I actually like spoke with the Lord more so than ever, and I had like pleaded with him, like, I don't want this out to get me, like, get rid of it. And I remember like the day after, maybe April 10th, I heard his voice saying, you know, all that stuff that you thought you were gonna go back to, burn it all, don't leave any traces of it. And for a time, maybe like 2 months, I was getting rid of everything. And when I thought I had gotten rid of something, and when I thought I had gotten rid of everything, I would find something. And even if it was just like the smallest little thing, like my best friend, she is still unfortunately down this dark path, but when I had found something that she had given me, like a small pin with like the pagan symbol on it with the star, or like there was a cup that she gave me that said, don't hex my vibes, like little things like that. As much as like at the time that she had given me those gifts, I appreciated them, but it was not good for my soul, and it was not good for my growth in this path. And I would just keep finding these things for a little bit, and I would just destroy them violently. I don't exactly know the verse in the Bible, but like, you're not supposed to make friends with your demons. You're supposed to kill them. And with these kinds of things, you're not supposed to get rid of them gently and be like, oh, it's okay, and put it in the garbage gently. Like, no, God calls you like to burn it, rip it up violently, smash it, do anything to get rid of it in the name of God, like the name of Jesus. You are supposed to rebuke your demons. You're supposed to kill them and destroy them, and instead of befriending them. And it's like, as much as it has been such a painful and grueling journey, it has also brought me so much peace as well, because I have made such a great friend group. I have made such a good community, and I have never felt my soul being so much lighter and more uplifted, and it's so peaceful. And it was not an easy journey for me, because I could have easily fallen back into that path, because it was a path of comfort for about like 6 years. It was a path of comfort, and it was not a path, even though like it was not a path that was easy, but it was comfort, and it was something I had known for so long. And as much as the Christian path is a peace-bringing one, and it uplifts your soul, it's also not an easy one, because you have to convict your spirit every day. You have to wake up and make God your first priority. You have to wake up every day and ask God to get rid of your demons. You have to ask God to not give into the fleshly temptations, whether it be like having sex before marriage or involving yourself in the occult path, I guess. But you have to convict yourself and you have to hold yourself accountable, and that's really hard because it is so easy to fall back into those fleshly desires. But as like from the perspective of like an ex-witch, I guess, it's so peace-bringing. You will have so much peace, even though like it is so scary to like throw yourself away. In a sense, you also get so much peace by doing so. And I'm grateful to God every day that I was able to do that, and I was able to put myself through the trials and put myself into the fire to grow. And I have struggled like time and time again to not remain faithful, but to like believe in his goodness sometimes, because even now my testimony is still growing. Because a couple months ago, I was going through a rough patch in like, I guess with the holidays coming up, I had just gotten into grad school and I was very overwhelmed with this new opportunity that, yes, God has presented me with, but I was struggling to see the goodness. And unfortunately, I had gotten strangled at my job and I had gotten severely hurt. And I'm still trying to see the goodness of God. But on that same note, if he wasn't good, I wouldn't be breathing. I would probably be lying in a hospital bed or probably even dead. And it is by his grace and his mercy that I'm still here and I'm still breathing, even though, yes, I'm going through unmeasurable pain, but I'm still here. And I guess that's the best way I could put my testimony, that I am a living, breathing testimony of God, and he is good all the time, no matter what circumstance, and that he is still with me, even though I may not feel it. He's still with me, pushing me through everything, and I'm grateful for that each and every day. And I pray that that my testimony can serve as a light to others in some way, shape, or form, or even if it may not serve as a light for guidance, but rather it brings peace to those who need it, and that, in a sense, to show that like your pain is not for nothing, but rather God will put you through the trials of fire to help you grow. And I really hope that it provides peace to somebody out there who's listening. So thank you for tuning in to this episode of the podcast, and I hope you guys go out and be the salt and light of the earth, and we will see you guys in part 2. Thank you.